right, hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of NFL Football Talk. It is, of course, playoff time, and I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr. We're going to break it all down. We had a couple of surprises there from Wild Card Weekend. Now we get into the divisional round. The participants started with, we had 4 games last week, 4 this week. Next week will be 2, and then, of course, the Super Bowl in just a few weeks. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I don't do this show alone. I do only enlist the very best talent available, none other than Chris Lardieri. A lot of you already follow him on Twitter at Chris L Sports, and also read him online, chrislsports.blogspot.com. Mr. Lardieri, what's happening, man? It's that time of the year. It's that time of the year.
Charles, one of the greatest weekends of the year. We're down to the divisional round when a lot of people feel that the best teams are left standing, and I happen to agree. I think these are going to be 4 tremendous games. I'm looking forward to it. Wild card weekend was great, other than the fourth quarter and Andy Dalton throwing a playoff game away yet again. It was a competitive game up until that point. So let's hope for more of the same this week. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and how about those Chargers going in there to Cincinnati? And, we talked about it, and Rivers got it done. Chargers are hot, and Cincinnati, the problems continue. And I'm sure it's just going to be a tumultuous offseason, not only for Dalton, but, everybody involved in the organization. Why can't you win a playoff game at some point?
Yeah, and they're going to have to do without their offensive coordinator, Jay Gruden, who just left to take the Redskins job. And I opined on Twitter, I wonder if Dan Snyder realized it was Jay and not John that he hired. But, I think in Jay's defense, when you look at it, a well-rested and recovered RG3 is probably a little more appealing working with Mr. Dalton, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, that's true. And talking about the whole, head coaching vacancies, here's the other thing is, as we know, Ken Wisenhunt is one of the hot prospects, the offensive coordinator right now for the Chargers. And, of course, he was the head coach when the Cardinals went to the Super Bowl just a few years ago. But here he is in the middle of prepping for this divisional playoff round, but according to the NFL rules, of course, you can start interviewing head coaches right after Wild Card Weekend. So do you think maybe, and looking at how long the offseason is, do you think maybe they should just say you cannot interview for a new head coach until after the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think they should. And, baseball has a rule where basically no transactions or anything like that seem to go down until, I believe, the conclusion of the World Series. You hear about managers getting fired, but I mean, you don't see the quick turnover like you do in the NFL. And you look at Wisenhunt, and I know the Lions flew out to San Diego to interview him, and apparently the Browns are going to fly to Denver tomorrow to meet with him. But A, it's got to be distracting, and B, I really don't think it's fair to his current team. He's trying to prep for the game. I know they say, well, it's an off day or whatever, but I don't know about you. On my off day, I want to rest. I don't want to be interviewing. So, I think back to many years ago when Marvin Lewis was the defensive coordinator of the Super Bowl winning Ravens team the first time around. Because he was in it so long, he didn't even get a job that following year. Everyone thought he was the hot candidate. So it almost punishes you if you're a coordinator, a coach on a team that's in the Super Bowl. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I wonder why, because the NFL, and I don't always know why they do the things that they do, but they must have some kind of reasoning for doing what they're doing as far as when you can interview coaches, because otherwise it's really punishing the offensive and defensive coordinators of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of off the top of my head is the college coaches. They figure if they're not going to get NFL jobs, maybe they might move along before this proverbial blackout period might happen. I'm really not sure, but I think that, and honestly, they'll probably never admit to this, but the worst teams, the teams that don't make the playoffs and or have the worst record, fire their coaches, get their first pick at the best candidate. So it adds to that competitive balance and any given Sunday mentality.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's talk a little bit about. Now I know we're talking playoffs, and you normally wouldn't mention a team like this, but I wanted to talk about the Cleveland Browns for just a moment. And of course, the big deal was them sending Trent Richardson over to the Colts for a handful of draft picks. Now, if I can make a correlation here, draw a little comparison. If we remember the Cowboys dynasty of the mid-'90s, the whole Troy Aikman, Irvin, Emmitt Smith, that dynasty was built because of that Herschel Walker trade when he was traded to Minnesota for a bunch of draft picks. And then they turned those draft picks into a Super Bowl championship team. Minnesota, on the other hand, cut Herschel Walker after one season. Now, when you look at Trent Richardson, all he got, with all the troubles he's had, and then last week, he only has one carry, fumbles at the goal line, and doesn't even see any action the rest of the game. So are we seeing a possible scenario like that here with the Richardson to Indianapolis thing involving the Browns and Colts?
Absolutely. The only difference is that Herschel Walker was a top-notch running back when we traded him, and with Richardson, I think he was kind of having a sophomore jinx. But other than that, it's a great analogy because you get a running back that was much heralded coming out of college and was a starter for a team and suddenly dumped, surprisingly, and the team that traded him hoards a bunch of good draft picks, and the team ends up with him. People are questioning it, not even a full season later. So I think it's a great analogy by you. Good job to you and your crack research team on that. The one caveat I will add is Jimmy Johnson was doing the drafting for the Cowboys back then, and you and I both know the Browns will somehow manage to screw up those draft picks.
Yeah, that's true. But when I look at the whole thing, though, it's very, very possible that Trent Richardson is going to get cut from the Colts at some point here, if not in the off season, maybe a couple of games into next season.
Yeah, with the salary cap being what it is, you can't afford to pay a running back that much money to sit behind Donald Brown.
Yeah, there you go. And you know what, while we're on playoffs, of course, now the question of expanded playoffs has come up. And of course, Jerry Jones is for it for the obvious reasons, which means the more teams that get in, the more he'll be able to possibly brag about having a playoff team in Dallas. But I was initially against it. But when I look at it, if we did it this way, there's 4 divisions already. If they added 2 extra wild card teams to each conference, then we would have, at first, we'd have a true wild card weekend. All the division winners, all of them, would get rewarded with 1 week off while the wild card teams fought it out. So 1 extra weekend of pure wild card football, and then you go ahead and match them up with all the division winners the next week. So what do you think about that?
I like it. I think it will happen because I think Roger Goodell is very well aware that he's not going to get his wish of an 18-game schedule. So what's the next best thing? And if you ask me, a better alternative, add a playoff team, an extra playoff game. Look at the ratings the NFL is getting. More money, more eyes on the TV, more exposure for the league. You get a couple happier teams in each conference. Jerry Jones had his way to make it like the NHL, where practically half the league makes it, but that's another story. And the only 2 things I would add to that is, A, I think they should consider changing the rule where Green Bay gets a home game while San Francisco, playing in a tough division with a better record, had to go up there. I think they have to do something about that. And B, you have more playoff games in January and late January with the weather being, and we're going to see that again this weekend. You better lift the blackout rule because, as we know, the NFL is becoming a TV game, but people aren't going to want to go sit out in the cold, and they can talk all they want about improving the stadium experience, but unless they're going to put a fireplace in front of your seat and bring your beers to you, people aren't going to fork out good money to go sit out in the brutal cold or the rain.
Yeah, that's true. And from what I hear, there's a lot of HD TVs out there in Green Bay, too. Even though their team didn't make the playoffs, but I think a lot of people were sitting home watching them.
Yeah, and you know what? You can't blame them.
Okay, well, the other thing you mentioned was when you talk about half the teams making the playoffs, that's really, if you look at the NHL, you look at the NBA, they're pretty much half the teams make the playoffs. They have 30 teams in the league and 16 teams make the playoffs. So if we look at it this year, if there was an expanded playoff, if they had 2 more teams in each conference in the NFL this year, we would wind up with, Pittsburgh would be in, Baltimore would be in, the Arizona Cardinals would be in, and I didn't go any further than that. But that would be a few pretty exciting teams to add to the mix.
Yeah, definitely. And even though some of them had 8-8 records,
right.
Feel like the Steelers were peaking at the right time and could have made things interesting. And as we've seen many times before, it's not like the NFL of the 70s we saw when the Steelers and Cowboys were dominant, or even in the 80s with the 49ers, Giants, Redskins. When you went 14-2, then you needed that bye week, and you could practically coast your home field advantage into the Super Bowl. It's anyone's game to win, and you put a team like Arizona in there. I think they possibly could have been the NFC's version of the Chargers this year.
Right, and let's go ahead and we're going to make the picks here pretty soon, but let's talk about last week's games a little bit, and mainly Andrew Luck and that comeback. Down 28 points to the Chiefs, and that's something where you might be willing to just go ahead and fold and say it's not our day, but Luck, inexperienced as he is, here he is, only his second year in the league, and really, he led this team on that comeback. And you could tell at the end of the game when he did his interview, I think he was about at the point of tears, just with gratitude, joy, relief, and all these emotions coming down on him at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And, you and I were exchanging texts earlier in the game, and I was telling you how I was out with my kids and that I'm not missing much. And by the time I got in front of a TV, I caught all the best parts of the game. So thank you, Andrew Luck, for that. I appreciate it. Not a lot of people are talking about this. He's only his second year in the league. He's had an unbelievable amount of fourth-quarter comebacks. And dare I say it, he's reminding me of another former Stanford quarterback, Mr. John Elway. So I really enjoy watching him. For a big guy, I know he's not the fastest, but he's got good feet, as we saw that run when he scampered into the end zone for a touchdown. He does it with his arm. He does it with his head. Really, really just a treat to watch. So I think it poses an interesting matchup in Foxborough this Saturday.
Well, you know what? You mentioned something when you say he's not the fastest. Here's one thing, though. It was overshadowed because RG3 was in camp, but the second fastest quarterback at the Combine was Andrew Luck. RG3 was number 1. Andrew Luck was number 2. So he has deceptive speed for a big guy like he is.
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's because he's so big, he doesn't look like he's moving fast. But I'm sure if you or I were to look at him on field level, it'd be impressive. And you could see it in his footwork. He's not a Dan Marino hobbling around. And while he's on a burner like a Kaepernick, it's a very underrated thing he has, even just with the pass rush coming, how he can step up in the pocket, step out of the way to elude the rush. Look, this guy is going to be someone to watch, and I predict by the end, not only will he make the Colts fans forget about Peyton Manning, but if he stays healthy, he's likely to go down as one of the all-time greats.
Yep, so he is going to be what Aaron Rodgers was to the Packers when Brett Favre left Green Bay. And then they soon kind of forgot about Brett Favre as Rodgers' era began, and it looks like Luck may be doing the same type of thing there.
Charles, you are full of great analogies tonight. You're on top of your game. I'm impressed.
All right, then, you know what? How about Colin Kaepernick, going in there into the frigid weather of Green Bay? And, of course, Kaepernick doesn't wear any sleeves or anything. He's got the full gun show going on in Green Bay, and minus 15 degrees, that's with no wind chill factored in. But he gets it done, and I like the way Kaepernick is going. You figure making it to the Super Bowl last year, and then having a rough regular season this year, and then coming back and getting into this was a dogfight against the Packers, and he comes out on top.
Yeah, he's definitely getting hot like he did last season. The Packers made a huge mistake in not shadowing him, and he essentially beat them with his feet. There were a number of scrambles, including the one late in the game that led to the game-winning field goal that absolutely put a dagger in the Packers. Some questionable play calling in the red zone. Otherwise, I think the 49ers would have put the Packers away sooner. But he looks good, and let's not forget it. We've been beating this drum throughout the season here on NFL Football Talk with Michael Crabtree back and the way Anquan Bolden's played and having Vernon Davis as a weapon. He's got everything at his arsenal now at his disposal, and it's helping him out. And, we can't key on Frank Gore now with Kaepernick running and receivers to throw to.
Yeah, and Anquan Bolden is a great X factor because even going back to when the Arizona Cardinals made the Super Bowl, Anquan Bolden was there with Larry Fitzgerald. The Baltimore Ravens win the Super Bowl last year, Anquan Bolden is on the team. And now you look at the Niners and the season they're having, and Anquan Bolden is there. It's an interesting receiver because he doesn't seem to be a factor all the time. But once he gets going, you can't stop him.
No, and the thing with him is he makes the catches at the big time, at the key points in the game. He's a big-time player. He did it in the Super Bowl. He did it in the upset against the Broncos. When teams would key on Larry Fitzgerald when he was with the Cardinals, he'd make the key catch. Mm-hmm. So that's his thing. He's not a number one, but he's just is a very reliable receiver, and look for him to be a factor again this Sunday.
Correct. And then what happened exactly in in Philadelphia with the Nick Foles and Shady McCoy looked like they were ready to run over the Saints, and it didn't really happen that way. And I think when we look at it, though, it's kind of one of those experience factors, because you look at just a couple of times there where they just didn't execute when they could have, as far as the Eagles. And then you have the Saints playing, and you could tell they have been in this type of a situation before.
Yeah, the combination of Sean Payton and Drew Brees is very dangerous, and I was on the wrong side of that pick last week. But ultimately, they got off the road playoff schneid, and they left a little bit too much time on the clock, and look who beats them, the man jettisoned by the Chargers, who continues to pay dividends for the Saints, Darren Sproles. If that Eagles defender doesn't make the horse collar tackle, he's liable to take it back the whole way. So at key times, they've got guys who step up, and they look up Pierre Thomas sighting. I mean, who would have thought he would have been the key runner in a game that featured LaShawn McCoy?
Yeah, well, Pierre Thomas, though, was not healthy for that game, though. So, it was like they played with less than a full squad, and still were able to pretty much put it on the Eagles last week. So we just chalk it up to experience. And as far as the Eagles, this is part of the learning curve. And I think they got some bright future ahead, though, in Philadelphia with this Eagles team, with that quarterback, and with that coach.
Yeah, and one thing to keep your eye on, let's see if Michael Vick's back next year. That could be something interesting. But, a very young team, and I'm sure they still got some salary cap room, so they're not going anywhere.
Yep. There we go. Okay, so, before we get into, picking this week's games, any further little nuggets of wisdom you like to throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, we're here in the playoffs. Like we had touched on earlier, I thought it was interesting the NFL likes floating an idea about playoff expansion while everyone's following the games and what are going on. Hitting on something we talked on last week, I heard there are still some seats for sale in Foxborough, and I know they're anticipating a monsoon there. But again, one thing to track. Let's see if the FCC and or the federal government overturn this blackout rule, because let's face it, I think it's an antiquated rule. People really want to watch on TV. They'll go to games when the weather's good, but look, I grew up going to Giants games, and I remember sitting in the old Giants stadium when they beat the Redskins in the NFC Championship, when they won their first Super Bowl back in January of '87, and one of the coldest games I've ever been to with the wind and everything, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, but, tickets were a lot cheaper back then.
Yeah.
To spend a couple $100 and take you and your kid with you and eat, I mean, you really can't tailgate in that weather.
Right.
The NFL really needs to consider this. They want to be a television league, but they want to have their cake and eat it too. So, let's see if I guess New England sells out. Green Bay and Cincinnati came in at the last minute and did it, but I mean, look, the weather's really nice here in Southern California. If there was a stadium nearby, I'd still probably rather watch it on TV. At the end of the day, ultimately it's the cost, I think.
Yeah, and like I hit on last week as well, and keep saying, the cost of taking you and the wife and kids, or even you and a buddy going to a playoff game, you could put a 50-inch TV on the wall. There you go.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting. I have people in my family with Giants tickets, and you could sell those tickets for a lot of money for a playoff game. People will buy them. You'll make a little more than what you laid out, but I mean, that sort of thing comes in handily. People are happy to get that money to pay off some of the Christmas bills. That's another thing people don't take into account. So a very, very interesting trend that I don't think is going away.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the billion-dollar deals are TV deals, and not about people going to the stadiums and buying peanuts, popcorn, and beer. That's just kind of an added thing, but that real gold nugget is those TV deals. And the NFL, as they see stadium attendance decreasing, they'll see their TV numbers increasing, and that's really what they want.
As I've long said, the NFL is the single best reality television, and they don't employ writers like quote-unquote reality television.
There you go. Very eloquently said, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the picks of the week here. And last week, Hey, we didn't do bad. I went 3-1. Chris goes 2-2. You still got the lead on me overall, but we didn't count the playoffs here. So let's go ahead and get the games out of the way. Looking at, well, let me get the right panel up here first. And okay, the Seahawks. We got the New Orleans Saints at the Seattle Seahawks. This game is going to be tomorrow. So the Seahawks, remember, they beat the Saints just a few weeks ago, 34-7. Just went ahead and wiped them out. The Saints took care of the Eagles last week, but they're looking at, when you talk about those monsoon conditions, it's supposed to be nasty and sloppy and rainy there in Seattle. And we know how Seattle is at home already, and now you got a dome team going into Seattle. So we picked against the Saints last week, but any chance that they go in there and upset Seattle in Seattle's backyard?
You know what, Charles? There is a chance, and for the record, I picked the Saints to go to the Super Bowl, and I'd love to pick against them because I think Seattle is a better team. They've got the home field advantage, but my intuition is telling me the Saints, despite all the conventional wisdom, are going to go in there and pull this out. Partially because I feel that Sean Payton, as a coach, is better than Pete Carroll. Drew Brees, I'll take him any day over Russell Wilson. And in an odd psychological twist, I think the fact that the Seahawks put such a beatdown on them in early December, and they got out to a 17-0 lead early, and the game was essentially over after the first quarter. I do not trust Sean Payton after he's seen a team once. I mean, I think he's going to make adjustments. Ever since that game, the Saints' defense has really turned it around. They contained McCoy and Nick Foles last week. If the elements are rough, I think the Saints got their ground game going again, so you can't just key on the pass. I think it's going to be an exciting, close game. I know this is a very contrarian pick, but I'm going with the Saints. And on top of that, I don't like the way the Seahawks are playing down the stretch. Arizona beat them up there. They're not invincible. The Seahawks, when they went into San Francisco, really got it taken to them. So I don't know why. It's just based on intuition. You can call me crazy, but I think the Saints are going to pull it out. I figure there's got to be one upset this week, and that's the one I'm targeting.
Okay, well, you said I can call you crazy, right?
Yeah, everyone does.
Okay, man, you is crazy. Seattle is going to take this game. I think when you look at the team, not only playing at home, but with the weather conditions, and, I don't like to harp on weather conditions too much, except when it's going to be very windy, very rainy, very, very sloppy. You got Marshawn Lynch, beast mode on the ground. So if this turns into just an ugly mud game, it still favors the Seahawks. I think they can go either way. They can either go ground and pound, or they can go through the air. So I like the Seahawks with their ground attack, I think, being the difference in this game. And, they're not going to their defense is not going to let Jimmy Graham get away from them either. So I like their defense. I like their ground game. And I also like what Russell Wilson does when the chips are down. And plus, he has that experience that he gained last year. So I like the Seahawks in this game.
All right. Right off the bat, we disagree. I like it.
Okay. And then the Saturday night game, Indianapolis Colts going into New England. And you will remember the only time that Luck played against Brady was last season. And got beat 59-24, just got their heads handed to them. But he was a rookie at that point. The Colts coming off that big win last week, but going into Foxborough against a Patriots team that finished 12-4, and it was like every week I thought they can't win. Okay, another injury. This is the one that does them in. They can't overcome this. They won't beat this team. Now they're doomed, and it never happened throughout the season. I like the Colts to go in there and give them a good fight, but I got to go with, the experience. I got to go with Belichick and Brady, and somehow, even if this is the ugliest game you ever saw, I think the Patriots come out on top here.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that the Colts are even in it is not necessarily a fluke, but more a function of the Chiefs getting out to a big lead and suffering key injuries, Jamal Charles on the defensive side of the ball, and essentially forced to continue to throw. Alex Smith had a real nice game, but at the end of the day, when you key on the pass, you can stop Alex Smith. And the Colts benefited from that. The Chiefs' defense folded, and I do not think that Mr. T.Y. Hilton is going to get off for 200-plus yards and 11 catches. And burn the secondary late in the game. I know Belichick will devise some sort of scheme to triple cover him if he has to. The Colts really don't have much of a running game. And on the offensive side of the ball, Patriots really got the ground game going. I mean, there's been a number of LeGarrette Blount sightings, another reclamation project from Belichick.
Right.
And, you've always got Brady, and the elements are indeed bad. They're not a team that's looking to throw the deep ball. They'll throw a ton underneath to Julian Edelman if he has to, and I think experience wins here and ends the Andrew Luck parade.
Yep, I got to go with you too. So we're both in agreement. We're going to go all in on the Patriots here.
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, let's get to the Sunday games. And here we got a matchup, very similar teams. San Francisco 49ers in Carolina to play the Panthers. The same record throughout the year. Carolina takes care of the Niners, of course, earlier in the season. But you got the Niners and that experience, and you got Cam Newton coming into his own here. But, again, we talk about experience, and which they don't have in the playoff game. So how would you see this one? Kaepernick coming off the big win, plus last year's, versus kind of an upstart Cam Newton. Let's just go ahead and say that.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be a slugfest, much like the first time they played in November. While I think the 49ers played very well and got a lot of momentum coming in, I think the Panthers' defense is completely unheralded and underrated. I think they're going to pose far more fits for Colin Kaepernick. The Packers had no Clay Matthews. Their defense really wasn't that great, and they still almost pulled the game out. I think the Panthers will be happy to have Steve Smith back. Their offense really sputtered the last couple games of the year with him out, and I think the Panthers pulled a pseudo upset, and their defense maybe gets a couple key turnovers, and Mr. Newton makes the passes when he has to, and they win. I just feel that the Panthers are the NFC's version of the Chargers for some reason. I feel like they're the team that's fit to make a legitimate run at the Super Bowl, and I'm going to go Carolina.
Wow, going Carolina. Now, okay, we got Kaepernick on one side. We got Frank Gore in the backfield. And that defense of the Niners at all three levels is fierce. The Panthers is too, but I got to go with the experience factor here. I'm going to pick the Niners because these are very similar times, but the Niners have kind of been there and done that. And I think the adrenaline in the playoffs is a little different. And the Niners are able to handle that. And I think you're going to see the Panthers play well. And at the end of this game, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to think about probably 3, maybe 4 plays. And we think, hey, you know what? If the Panthers had converted that one, they would have turned the tide. If they had done this, they would have won. But there's going to be a few key points that I think the Niners are going to play better than the Panthers, and that's going to be the deciding factor in this game.
I've been saying that all year, and every single time Cam Newton's proving me wrong. So I think it's time to jump back on that bandwagon. He seemed to have really matured this season.
Okay, we'll see. I like where he's going, and I think he's going to be a good quarterback from this point forward. I just don't think at this point that he's ready to take down Kaepernick and the Niners. So I love disagreeing on games, man.
It makes it fun.
Okay, and then Sunday night, the San Diego Chargers in Denver to face the Broncos. Now, they each beat each other on each other's home field this past season. We've talked about Peyton Manning and the playoffs and playoff pressure. We know about Rivers. Nothing really needs to be said that hasn't been said on every talk show out there and ESPN and everything else. So go ahead and pick this one, man. What do you think? Chargers at Denver.
I've been going back and forth on this game, and I've been on the Chargers bandwagon. I told you they're going to take a legit shot to make the playoffs. If that was the most previous time you called me crazy on this show. And I picked them last week, and you know what? I want to, but it seems like everyone in Bristol and the conventional media is on that bandwagon. I think the Chargers play better when the chips are against them and no one believes in them, much like teams like the Giants and Packers did in recent memory, and even the Ravens last year. But I think what the deciding factor for me to pick the Broncos is that the Chargers have some injuries that not a lot of people have talked about.
Matthews is banged up a little bit. Yeah,
he's been walking around in a boot, and if you're gonna win against Denver, you're gonna have to run the ball at some point. Not that they have a great defense by any means, but Champ Bailey's back, and I know he's not the Champ Bailey of old, but still a good cornerback. And I think that, combined with the fact they're missing Nick Hardwick, their center, and let's face it, Sunday is the 1-year anniversary of the Broncos blowing that game to the Ravens. It's going to be a balmy 40 degrees in Denver, and that favors Peyton Manning. And this is a team that's older and needed the week off. They're going to get Wes Welker back, who didn't play the last time they met when the Chargers upset them in Denver. I think that's going to help. I think it'll be a good game, but for some reason, I think Peyton Manning's going to pull it out.
Well, I don't know. We look at the defense when you talk about the Chargers needing to move the ball, but Antonio Gates is healthy. Even with Ryan Matthews banged up, hopefully he'll be able to play. But on the Denver defense, of course, Doomerville they lost in the offseason due to a faulty fax machine, and then Von Miller, he goes down late in the season. He's not going to be there either. That's a lot of upfront pressure from those front seven they're used to getting. They're not going to be able to get. And I think the Chargers play good ball control offense. I got to go with the Chargers here. And it comes down to, also, I talk about the Peyton Manning apologists, as in last year somehow it was Raheem Moore's fault that Peyton Manning threw an interception in overtime. But this is one of those games, and I think Manning has to be feeling the pressure as well, because it's now getting out there as far as his playoff records. 8 times he's been one and done in the playoffs. There's all that riding on the shoulders of him and the team. And the Chargers, they're rolling right now. They're on a good roll. They're in a good rhythm. And I like the Chargers, even though they're 9-point underdogs last time I checked. But I like the Chargers to go in there and really leave the Mile High City feeling low.
I like it, but you're wrong. No, in all seriousness, I have to be consistent. I picked the Broncos to go to the Super Bowl, and I've got to stick with my gut come hell or high water. Maybe a broken clock is right twice a day, but a little bit of intuition, a little bit of I would love to see both my teams make the Super Bowl. Of course, I have zero money on that.
Well, you also thought that the Texans might go to the Super Bowl too, but you got off that bandwagon about after week 4, so you can go ahead and get off this one if you want to.
I seem to remember you picking them winning that division handily. So don't get your Colts garb yet, all right?
Well, when you think about it, as far as the Super Bowl picks, I said it was going to be either the Ravens or Steelers from the AFC, and then either the Falcons or the Giants from the NFC. So cards on the table. That's what I said at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, you know what? If my teams go out on Saturday and Sunday, I'll still have a successful year and can say I'm a better Super Bowl prognosticator, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. At least your team made the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, at least my teams didn't mail it in like the Giants.
Well, the teams that you picked, but the team that is your heart, which is the Giants, hey, better luck next year. I think the Giants will be back. But, we'll talk about the teams here. Before we go ahead and sign off, anything that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I'd like to share my picks too well this week, and I'm tired of being under 500. No, in all seriousness, like I had hit on earlier, I think this is going to be a great weekend for football. This is why we love it. This is why the NFL is a multi-billion-dollar entity. And that said, I think that probably here in the next week, when we get out to championship week, the most scrutinized thing we're going to start to hear about is the weather forecast for the greater New Jersey area surrounding New York City. You're starting to hear rumblings about it now. I heard one person interviewed a weather forecaster about how soon we could get a 7 to 10 day projection on the weather, and that this is going to be the big story as we head once championship weekend's over. The media is going to have a feeding frenzy like the one we haven't seen since Chris Christie shut down some lanes near the George Washington Bridge. So that'll be the latest media firestorm in the NFL.
Okay, and championship weekend is my favorite weekend. Even though divisional is good, but still championship weekend. I mean, it's like too many Super Bowls in the on that Sunday. So I love championship weekend. Love the Super Bowl. I just love football when it comes down to it, man.
Amen. And you know what? If my picks go right, we're going to see the matchup everyone wanted last year but didn't get: the Patriots and the Broncos in Denver.
So the football gods might be on your side, and kind of want to see Brady and Manning share high noon one more time, but we will see about that. That wouldn't be a bad thing.
No, not at all. But by the same token, I mean, you get a Chargers Patriots rematch in New England, going back a few years ago, AFC Championship rematch, or even Andrew Luck going into Denver, the student and the pupil from the Colts. I mean, a lot of interesting combinations on the AFC side, and on the NFC, we could have a Seattle 49ers rematch. That'd be another great game up there in the Northwest.
Yep, and if you remember too, when the Giants won that first Super Bowl back in '07, it was Phillip Rivers on the AFC side. He first beat Peyton Manning in Indy, and then he went and lost to Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game after that. So,
and that team,
those things happening. Go.
Yeah. Well, Gates was banged up. LT was on the sideline, and Rivers 6 days off of knee surgery. So, I think a healthy Charger team would like some revenge.
Yep, there we go. All right, so the table is set. So everybody, hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. and for Chris Lardieri, remember, follow him on Twitter at Chris L Sports. You can follow yours truly on Twitter at The Inside Sports. We'll see everybody next week for championship weekend. In the meantime, enjoy the divisional round, and thank you for watching.